That's the original theme for our show. Journey of an Aesthete podcast, and I thought it would be fun to play that, which I composed back in the Wayback Machine, as they say now. 2018, 19 maybe, somewhere in there. And instead of our aesthetics stream theme. But why am I playing that? Well, there's a little bit of a reason. Because musically, it's rather similar to the composing styles that not of what we're discussing. So it's actually very much unlike the composing styles of a nighttime talk show. But it's a little bit more like old news, hard news, John Chancellor, 60 Minutes, kind of urgent, It has a little kind of a, hello, how you doing? How's everybody doing? So there's an urgency to this kind of music, and it also this kind of, these kind of harmonies. And so I thought it'd be fun to play around with that. On our shows here, I never really fully know what I'm going to do. I make plans. I have sometimes rather elaborate outlines. In a show like today's show, episodes, I really have to plan because we're dealing with television and film. And so I have to plan all the clips, So, and that involves many hours of curation. And today's episode is no exception. But that's just a long way of saying, even though I have all these plans, at a moment's notice, like just now, I might change what music I play, or I might get an idea to do something a little different. I mean, today I got the idea to show a clip from Melanie Mayron and director Claudia Ryle promoting their film Girlfriends on Brian Lynam's Canadian TV show City Lights. There's a little clip of Brian Lyman interviewing them, and that fits in a way because today we're going to have a couple of other clips from that Canadian talk show personality in order to discuss kind of how different people do different things and do things differently, in terms of style. Johnny Carson, of course, DavidLetterman, but we'll go to my chair and kind of talk a little bit here. So that's right. Product placement. I thought it'd be appropriate, since we're discussing TV, that I would drink from the Joy of Books. Joy of Books. Remember the joy in the 80s, the late 70s, the joy of sex, the joy of cooking, the joy of this, the joy of that. This is a throwback to that. Long live the independent bookstore. This is a bookstore in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and I purchased this mug to add to my collection of coffee mugs. And I bought some interesting books there. That is, I thought it would be most appropriate in a show about TV, network TV, in the analog age of the 70s, 80s, into the 90s to mention books. Because after all, culturally, books and TV people were always opposed to each other in most commentary of those years. And there's a famous Harper's interview with Neil Postman, who I've covered on our show. I did a whole book lunch on Technopoly by the late Neil Postman. And the great Camille Paglia having a debate about popular culture. And I think the headline in Harper's, this would have been in 1992, was, "She wants her TV, he wants his book." And they have really a very fancy French meal, hors d'oeuvres, and the Oder Duck. And so it was, I guess, sprung for by Harper's Magazine in those days, in the well-heeled 90s. And they had this really long conversation where Neil Postman says, "I really like Charlie's Angels." And so again, the headline is a little not quite accurate. It's a little misleading because Neil Postman's a man in the world, and his life is not only Marshall McLuhan and studying media. He's a person, and he would watch a junkie TV show, of course, and they're talking. Camille Paglia, of course, has a point of view is very much like my own, which is that in a very real sense, television, especially network television, especially news, in those years, was not, as is often talked about today, an illusion or a distortion of reality, but in many ways captured something of the real world. That is actual truth. And so the debate was Neil Postman was saying, when you have an emotion or experience, it's self-contained, and you don't go from crying to laughing. That's psychotic to do that, and that he was decrying the effect on TV. You have things that don't fit together. You'll have a silly advertisement next to a serious discussion of cancer, next to an interview with an actor, that there was a kind of a hodgepodge indifference about it all when you all put it together. But as we've discussed on this show, some of the greatest artists of those years, so the Rauschenbergs and the collagists, were interested in putting things that don't belong together and emotions that don't seem to belong together alongside each other. And Camille Paglia says to him, but, isn't the world like that? Isn't, you go outside of your door and something could change in an instant, an hour from now, that changes your whole life, that has nothing in common with what you are now experiencing. And of course, there's the remote control. And the remote control, you do this. For 30 years, people did this, switch channels. And that's in the nature of television in those years. And again, I'm not here to put forth any particular doctrine or belief. I love Postman, and Postman, in a way, Postman and Paglia are both correct, because Postman predicted that politics would be taken over by entertainment that became totalitarian, which is where we are. He predicts that. And he predicted what would happen through, variety shows, entertainment, and that it would happen. He actually said if we were ever going to lose our democracy, or democracy would be destroyed, it would be with a song and a dance, and it would be, done that way or through a celebrity. And he was writing about that in the early 80s. The book is called Amusing Ourselves to Death, and that title is very on the nose, but we're amusing ourselves to death, and that's where we are, of course. But on the other hand, Camille Paglia is as a scholar, is very interested in the mythic union. She loves Carl Jung and mysticism, the archetypes, and Elizabeth Taylor, and a certain writing about how Elizabeth Taylor is an ancient goddess and Aphrodite and all these things. So Paglia is more attuned to, her love for Madonna, for example, attuned to those aspects of pop or junkie culture that are have merit, and have something of value, and reveal something about the human condition. So I guess I would say, in true Mitch Hampton style, they're both right, they're both wrong. I didn't want to go on and on for too long about that, but let's talk about what I'm wearing, which I always do. So this is what I wore last week or 3 weeks ago. Now look at this jacket, 1975. Look at this. Let's see here. If you could see this up close, I misspoke last week or last episode. This is whipcord. So I talked about the different kind of cloths in menswear, wool cloths. There's so many. And I mentioned Covercoat, and I mentioned Calvary Twill. But in that family is also, this is really whipcord. And there's others, and they have a really strong line. This kind of fabric, this kind of very heavy gabardine is also similar. There's a strong sort of twill. This cloth that I'm holding here is from 1975, but it's wool. It's very fine English wool, and I got it used in Boston. But it's only for the winter. It's so heavy. It's almost as heavy as overcoat fabric, almost. It's very good for the winter, but as the weather changes and it goes up to 70, more or less the same color I'm wearing today, what you would wear in the summer. It's not quite as light as summer tropical suiting, but it's right on the edge. And you can see more or less the same. And I dress in sort of a uniform. I wear the classical menswear of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I don't deviate from that. And it's rather, except for ties like this. This is fun. Now, this is interesting. An Italian man in Milan, takes old fabrics, vintage fabrics, and he makes brand new ties handmade from those old vintage fabrics. And if you look at this tie, you would think, what time period? I would say maybe, one would say 1948, maybe. These kind of very wild. Charvet was a manufacturer in France, was known for these kinds of Art Deco patterns. But this fabric, this shows you how time flies. He wrote on his blog. I really like. He does good work, and I bought some ties from him. Gianni is his first name. I forget his last name. He said this is vintage tie fabric from 1990. So, is 1990 already vintage? Have we? But if you think about it, look at this. So this is probably something fabric from Ralph Lauren, but you want to go back to the real original fabric, this kind of fabric. Go back to the 40s and 50s. Look at this. This is a tie from, I think, probably 1949. More or less the same colors, more or less. This is a little darker, this is more red. And this is when you see a tie like this, you think Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, you think the jazz era. These are the kind of ties. You would see Charlie Parker in the bebop period wearing ties very much like this. Very loud patterns over a solid background. And this is my least favorite kind of neckwear, I have to say, for the most part. I tend to like clothing that's a little more restrained and not so loud. And these are all prints. Now, think about this. Most of my ties are what you call woven. So, here's a tie, more or less the same colors. Burgundy and some kind of little bit of blue. But look at this, see? See the weave in that? That's beautiful, beautiful work. And that's not a print, but that's all the weave of the thread. And of course, this is like illustrated. It's sort of on, it's more like it's kind of painted on, And so it was always thought for many years that the highest quality ties are woven and not printed. Because, it's not just a picture on a blank canvas, but it's kind of in the thread itself. But, in the summer and in the spring, males are dressed in the way that I dress, really like prints because they have a lightness, unlike this. This is definitely more of a winter tie. And, different seasons, which gets to this cloth. And this is cloth made for 65 degrees. So the way that I dress is very season conscious. You don't wear the same thing in February that you wear in April. In fact, you wear very different things. And all that has to do with the weights of cloths and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to talk too long about it, but that's kind of the theme today, is the fact that you have something like this, which is made to take a bulletproof, as I used to say, really heavy. And then you have this, which is, of course, very much lighter. And then later on in the season, I'll show you even lighter suiting wool fabrics that are lighter than cotton, made for 90-degree weather. Very open. So enough about that. I'm going to get my TV because I want to get geared up for things, and I want to, So I've been thinking a lot about television. Television. Television, well, what is it? Or what, I should say, what was it? Because, we're in a different era now. But television in these years that we're covering, as I said last week, it was really something it was basically to sell advertising. So the financial infrastructure was you'd have companies advertise a product, and you'd have just a slot of time. So let's say between 5 and 5:30, this show, I don't know when it was not night, I don't think, daytime. So I'm breaking the rules. I'm going into daytime stuff with this, but 7 to 8 p.m. is a slot. Or like, say, Phil Donahue was on, I don't know, at 10 a.m., say. Say it's 1982. Here's a hypothetical. Phil Donahue is doing his show on... He has Gregory Peck on, which he did, actually. I remember that show. He also had John Wayne on. So, special advertiser, John Wayne, Gregory Peck are going to be on Phil Donahue's show. And for that hour, you got to fill it with something. And so all the stuff we're dealing with today is all stuff where you're filling a slot. And the nature of having to fill the time slot with something for people to look at or pay attention to actually, I don't want to say bide their time, but while away their time. It's a different relationship to aesthetics and art and reality. It's much more, some have said passive. It is that, but it's much more casual. Much more casual. Even when you have a dramatic subject, that's still casual. Because of the fact that there's little competition, you only have a few channels, and people are watching. So I thought it'd be fun to go outside of the U.S. a little bit. This is Brian Lynham, and this is Mel Mayron, Claudia Wilde, 1977, and promoting the movie Girlfriends. Got the poster back here from the film, and I thought it'd be just to get away. We're going to get back to Dick Cavett and Johnny Carson, don't worry. Just to play just a little bit of it, just to see, Brian Lynham had a very unique approach to having a guest as a host. His approach was what we would call very intellectual. Very intellectual. Very erudite. He's very well read. Very respectful of his guests. A little bit like Dick Cavett, a little bit, but also a little bit even more, I should say, more intelligent than even Dick Cavett. Copyright Act of 1976. The material on this show in these episodes is used for the purpose of commentary and criticism, which falls under the fair use doctrine of copyright law. No copyright infringement is intended. Copyright disclaimer under Section 10, right? This is the Copyright Act of 1976, our bicentennial year. And I'm just going to play a little bit of this. We're going to go back to Johnny, some of the other people. But I just wanted to get a sense of what is it like when a country, not the U.S., having an known intellectual host, like this guy here, covers an independent film. He's not covering Star Wars. He's not covering Jaws. He's not covering Close Encounters. He's encountering Girlfriends. And even though Girlfriends is picked up by Paramount, a big studio, it's still, in every respect, can't say this enough, Girlfriends is the heart of the independent wave of American filmmaking in those years. Mark Rappaport, Claudia Wilde, later on Spike Lee, Jim Jarmusch, those 2023. This is the very heart of that. And let's just see what they have to say. What they kind of interesting here. Let's go. Of course, you would have music like this. 70s music.
City Lights is on location once again as host Brian Lynham talks.
Lynham is his name, Brian Lynham.
Making her feature film directorial debut with Girlfriends, which also marks the initial role for Melanie Mayron. Brian will be back with Claudia Weil, Melanie Mayron, and a scene from the film in just a moment.
Okay, here we go.
With director Claudia Weil, actress Melanie
Sounds a
Mayron.
little low.
And because the stories are building already, and there will be a time shortly when it'll have to be determined what's apocryphal about you and what actually happened.
Brian Letterman has a unique style. Again, like Dick Cavett, like Johnny Caron, he has his own way of approaching guests. Very intense. But he's also working from what I would say is the inside. By which I mean he absorbs in his research, gets inside the project or person he's talking about, and tries to connect one-on-one with that. That's just the way he did things, and he's unique in that, and this is an example of it
I'd
here.
like to start with that day in November of 1975 when you found yourself in the first shooting day of Girlfriends, and you were, I believe, on Broadway near 80th Street in front of a fruit stand. And you stood there and you wondered, as Claudia Weil, director, why nobody was doing anything, and turned to your cameraman, Fred Murphy. What did
Fred
you say
Murphy's
to
a
Fred
great
Murphy that
photographer.
first day?
I asked him how come everybody wasn't, going through the action. I didn't exactly understand why not. And he told me that you were supposed to say, camera, action. So,
With sound.
yes, sound, camera, action. And so I was really astonished because I thought people only did that in the movies. So, I'd come from documentary where you're used to waiting around till something interesting happens, and when it starts happening, you start filming. But you're not responsible for making it happen.
Melanie, will you tell us, as the actress in the film, what your immediate reaction was to a director who was waiting for someone to instigate action on her film? Did you think, what have I done?
Well, I was waiting, and it looked like we were ready, but nobody was saying anything, so I waited. And she went, "Oh, action!" Okay.
And things went smoothly from then.
Yeah, pretty smoothly. All
The
things
reason,
considered.
the reason I make a point of mentioning November 1975 is because although you had the credentials you had in documentary work and had done, I think, 15 episodes of Sesame Street,
Right, yes.
Yeah.
and had considered a combination of things. I'm fascinated after seeing Girlfriends and realizing the character Susan that Melanie plays and the other character Anne, that in terms of your life and studying with a man like, was it Oscar Kokoschka in
That's
Salzburg?
Right. Yes, uh-huh.
And Walker Evans at Yale
Wow.
photography? Just how much of Claudia Weil is in Melanie's character Susan, and how much of Anne is in both of you. And I wonder, when you and Vicki Paulin, your screenwriter, sat down, is a large part of the film you in both women?
Well, it's, I think to start from oneself is to limit things an awful lot. So I tried not to start from myself. The film is not autobiographical, certainly in terms of plot or in terms of character. The milieu is one that I know well, the terrain, the general lives and territory, of these people. But, and some of the details are, some of the very tiny details are. But the story itself is not at all autobiographical.
I'm curious, Melanie, because we know you from a combination of things. Harry and Tonto, Hustling on TV, in which you worked with Lee Remick and Jill Clayburgh,
Right.
and then you were reunited with Jill Clayburgh for Gable and Lombard.
Right.
Car Wash, You Light
Car
Up My
Wash,
Life.
one of my personal favorite.
And the credits are all there, and I just wonder about your attitude. You've worked on very big budget things, Universal Studios, doing something ambitious, working with a Canadian like Sidney Furie. Were there any adjustments for you when you knew that Claudia was working in a situation of limited funds, and you didn't have the corporate studio and money and the opportunity of doing things 10 or 12 times? Did it change your attitude or approach?
No, I was able, this was like being teacher's pet for me. Nobody had ever taken much time with me at all because I never did a part where they would take time. I was just assumed to do it because they were always supporting roles. And so there was never any director. In terms of feature film, just like you'd have a dressing room to go to here. I remember one day I was screaming, I need a chair, I need a chair. It was for a scene with Eli.
Talking about working with Eli Wallach. Now, admittedly, this is a style of filmmaking. You know, there was a lot of discussion up front about that the director is waiting for the actor to do something. Of course, you could see this is totally contrary to how most studio fictional filmmaking is done. You know, you have scripts, and you know, there's a very different waiting for something to happen. Or, as I said, there's not one way to make a movie. You know, you could plan it all out, plan all the features. But I thought it'd be fun just to take a detour from this very poppy commercial entertainment, play something a little bit different, and we'll stop that there and kind of figure out what I'm going to do next. But on the subject of Brian Linehan, let's see here. Let's go here. Got to move to more network television here. So let's go. Kind of always wondering how to proceed. You know, always wondering. So what do we got here? Library. Let's go. Playlist. Okay. Here we go. This playlist. I sit at the outside of the show. I kind of plan what we're gonna do and plan compile all these things. Now, let's see here. We're going to go back to our old friend, Farrah Fawcett. And I'm going to show...
We've just been talking around things. You had a statement. We were talking about Catholicism.
I'm going to show 2 different ways of interviewing the same movie star, TV star. Same person, same year. We're going to see what Johnny Carson does with this person, and then we're going to see also here what Brian Linehan does. Brian Linehan.
System in the church and conflict.
Let's go here. Go back.
I couldn't even, on my passport, when it said occupation, I put housewife. I was embarrassed to put actress. I thought, I'm not an actress yet. I'm still learning so much. I think that I see the improvement in myself. And I have to give a lot of that credit to the people that have helped me and that have paid compliments to me. And I guess you could say have treated me as an equal. I can remember on the set of Saturn III, we were about 2 months into filming, and one day I walked in, I was in a great mood, and I said to myself, I thought to myself, and I finally got up the nerve to say it to Kirk and Stanley Donen, the director, Kirk Douglas, my co-star. I said to them, if somebody had told me when I was at the University of Texas, you will be doing a film, your co-star will be Kirk Douglas, and you will be directed by Stanley Donen, I would have said, oh yeah, right, okay. Now here I find myself in that situation, and not only is Kirk Douglas working with me and reacting to me as an equal and listening to what I have to say and respecting my opinion, and the same goes for Stanley Donen. I finally got up the confidence to say, I feel my character would do this, and I worked on it last night. I think the scene would be better. I even one time got up the courage because actors and actresses will say to each other, do you think that was okay? Was that as good as it was in The Master when it's on their close-up? And I said to Kirk, no, I think it was better when you looked at me in the first take or something. I can't even remember what it was.
Well, let it play for a little bit because
I'd like to do it again. I thought, this is amazing. I have really learned. I have grown. And it was a tremendous thrill for me personally to start feeling that way and to start appreciating my craft and what I was doing. I think up until then, I kept saying I may not be in this business very long, and I kind of avoided the issue. And now I'm more upfront about it. I have more self-confidence. I'm aware of the pressure. I'm aware of what people ask me.
Let's see here.
Yes.
I mean, when you see
Okay,
people,
And maybe it's called growing up. I don't know.
maybe it's also remembering the kind of experiences you had early on when you described yourself as being the scapegoat on the set of Myra Breckenridge, and that it was the giant ego and the star tripping of Raquel Welch, who treated you very badly.
Yes.
Mae West, who, I mean, sardonically enough, was upset because she had been guaranteed there would be no other blonde on the set.
Yes.
I mean, when you
So
see
this is-
people conducting themselves, and the most important thing on a multi-million-dollar film is the size of the mobile home
Yes.
and the level of the air conditioning, you are now in a position, if you choose, to emulate Raquel Welch or Mae West, and I gather, having encountered people who've worked with you and know you, that you're not doing it. But how much of
So that's classic Brian Linehan. He gets to sort of the behavior of people on a notorious movie set, for example. Raquel Welch, these are icons. But he connects with the guests. He's always making the connection of, like, when you were on the set, this is what occurred. And it's a way of opening up. Now, Farrah Fawcett, at the end of her life, went into more visual art because of her. I've done podcasts about her work with the sculpture, and that was her first love was visual art. Her first love was painting and sculpture, and she was going to be an artist. And so she, in a way, comes back to that. But you got that in your mind. And we go back to Carson. Okay. Carson. Well, no, wait a second. We've done Johnny
the size
Carson.
of the mobile?
Let's stay with
No, we made this decision
um,
actually when I was in London filming Saturn 3. A couple
we've
of
talked
months
about
ago.
that before, but
Because it was
where are we here? Oh, you know what the problem is? I just realized something. History. So history. Here we go. Problem.
close-ups, and I usually have so much hair that it gives off a larger.
Now, Carson, again, was a genius and invented more or less his own style. But part of his style, and part of the success of his style for that period, was the distance. Not too much distance, but the formality. The formality. But not too much distance. He'll tell a joke. And also, again, a show like The Tonight Show was meant for basically everybody to watch. Anybody and everybody. It's not like Brian Linehan. It's not inside. It's not, details about character development or behavior on a set. And so I just thought it'd be interesting. So Carson is going to lean into her as a sex symbol, a model, an icon as much as an actor. Because that's the commercial. And you can see here. Very different. Turn this down a little bit.
Hello. You are a bowl of cream.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you.
I know
This is nice.
you've done this show before.
Yes.
And I guess I was very ill because I only take off if I hits terminal.
Yes.
And so I missed you. But we've seen each other before. I mentioned just before the show.
Notice that so again I use the phrase emotional intelligence, which Carson had in spades. So he says something slightly self-deprecatory. He says, well, I'm always working hard. It's only if I'm terminally ill why I miss a show, and I missed you. And he says something, it's kind of, it's very, very, very well done. It's his style. David Letterman throws a hand grenade, a bomb into this style, and develops his own style. Totally different. Equally valid, but totally different, totally opposite.
The last time I saw you, we were, I think it was Christmas shopping. We ran into each other in one of the stores.
Yes, we were both, I think, being bombarded.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to shop, isn't it?
Well, it has to be more, even more. Don't you hate to do that? Because they're looking at what you're looking at, and I feel very awkward if you're looking at something and somebody comes up. It's like watching you eat.
Yes, and also I think there's a lot of pressure because you're looking at something and...
Now that's classic mainstream, middle brow, if I could call it that, talk show, commercial entertainment. You pick something everybody can relate to. Everybody's been in the waiting room of a doctor's office. You'll talk about going to the dentist, talking about just shopping at a supermarket. And someone like Carson knows he's got to pick a topic like that has a kind of a universality. That's built into the aesthetic of this, built into this style. You know, you could say it's cliched if you want. You could say, well, we've heard that before, but that's built. That's
You may think,
that's
oh,
kind of
it's not terrific or something, and somebody else will pick up the exact same thing, and then they see you put it down, and then they put it down, and you think, oh, what am I doing for this store?
It has to be absolutely horrendous for you the last couple of years, because not only in this country now, but you're known all over the world. You went to the, I think it was the Cannes thing, and absolutely created a sensation over there, because the photographers there, you know, are next to animals, right?
Yes, it was, I think, really my first truly frightening experience.
Yeah.
Now I know that because now I'll be walking along and I'll hear footsteps running behind me. It doesn't even have to be after me. It could be after a dog or after something. And I kind of now turn and look around because, yes, I was very frightened.
I hardly think if you hear footsteps behind you, they're after a dog. That just, you know, I can't tell you. It's nice of you to say that. You get this a lot of times. You've been on so many covers and so forth, and on television. When people see you, they really kind of start to examine you. They've seen so many pictures, so they look to see if you're exactly like the picture, or maybe there's a little flaw here, or they expect the nose to be over here or something.
Do they do that to you? Or is it only females that they do that
No,
to?
you, come on now. I don't have that image that you have.
Well, I know, but I think that, well, you do. You have a very nice image. Yeah, see?
no.
Well, when I hear footsteps behind me, they are after a dog.
Notice I said self-deprecation. He says she's not a dog, means she's very good looking, but when there are footsteps behind him, he's a dog. So again, very skillful. And also dealing with very difficult material, that is attractiveness, beauty, sex, women, men. This whole episode is swirling around that stuff. Right? So his thing is, how can we talk about that and not have it, explode? Sort of like containing. This is the very quality of network television in those years that leftists, some leftists, maybe most leftists at that time, I don't know, cultural critics, historians, sociologists, psychologists hate. They hate the kind of... So the very thing that I'm praising in this episode, his emotional intelligence, his ability to connect with the guests, and so, is the very thing, because it's not subversive, because the goal of the show, like the Tonight Show, is not to shake things up, but just to entertain, it becomes seen as bad or less than. And that's still a common view. And this is always, again, in the history of the arts, has always been a war between different visions about what it is to make something. Do you want to make something that appeals to everybody? And you make something so you can pass the time. That's the phrase I was looking for. While away the time, passing the time. Or do you want to make something or do you want to be an Andrei Tarkovsky and make something to prepare your soul for death? Those are very different goals of an artist, I'm just saying there's different people have different goals when you make something. In this case is entertainment and beauty and, and all the rest of it. So it's interesting to think about that. So just trying to think here. What am I doing? Bear with me here. Bear with me. It's hard to navigate this thing because, I have to move things around and let's see here. All right. Again, nighttime. Let's see here. So when I last my last part one of this two-part series, I showed a political. Speaking of fights and wars, right? We just mentioned it. A political debate between a queer nation activist and Arsenio Hall, and I want to play this. And we're going to play some other Arsenio Hall too. I hope I've saved. Early political debate in 1989, when is this? 1989, 90, somewhere in there. No.
So I gotta have it.
Yeah, he gets very, very angry.
Now sit down. Sit down. What? When Harvey has
Yeah,
something
we've heard all this.
sit down. Sit down.
What is he
Now
saying?
booking this up a show.
So
It's my show. You understand? It's my show. It's my show, man. You think I haven't had somebody on the show because they're gay? What's wrong with you, man? I'm black. I'm black, man. I'm black, man. I'm the biggest minority you know about. I don't want to hear that gay trash, man. I got gay friends I've had on the show because you don't know them or it ain't who you want on the show. You got a problem with it. If you want to book it, get yourself a show.
I mean, that's I kind of a little bit siding with Mr. Arsenio Hall there a little bit. But you know, shades to come. This is the kind of these wars and debates would become all important to our lives 20 years later now, you know, in the 2000s, the 2010s. But, you know, I had friends in Queer Nation, so it's interesting. I've known people, and they're having a political discussion. But what's interesting is what Arsenio Hall tells them is have your own show. And, you know, that's kind of, if there is a solution, that would be the solution, so that they would have a show, and you know, why not? So he's mad. He's yelling at them. He's saying, this is the situation of my identity and my life experience. Look, come on, but why not have your own show? So he's yelling at me, saying, you know, if you don't like the way we do it, you do something. And it's kind of that spirit, right? Exactly. It's kind of that spirit. It's one of the missions and presiding spirit of our podcast journey of an aesthete, because I made my own show. Even though on this very show I talk about many commercial things. I talk about Johnny Carson, David Letterman, things that everybody's watched and everybody's seen. I talked about an Oscar-winning movie. I may talk about very known things, or I may talk about more obscure, unknown things. But you know, made my own show, and I think that's interesting, right? A debate like that. Trying to. I want us to get into some softer Arsenio Hall.
Dick Cavett.
Softer Arsenio Hall. Maybe Shannon Doherty. I don't know. It doesn't matter really. Yeah, this is again the 90s. Arsenio Hall was an icon. If anybody was an icon of the 90s, Arsenio Hall was an icon of the 90s, like Oprah Winfrey and others. And he's having a TV star on the show from Beverly Hills 90210. The late, great Shannon Doherty, who passed this last year. And I want us to study and focus on, with close reading, how he approaches this commercial TV celebrity and how she responds. It's kind of interesting. Just get a little bit of...
Next guest plays Jason Priestley's twin sister Brenda on what has become the hottest television show lately. And you know, this show had a slow start, and then it just broke through everything. It's called Beverly Hills 90210. And it deals with teens. Let's take a look at the clip. Clip?
You know how things go. I thought that maybe I was pregnant.
You can see the whole clip there. But
Shannon
hold
Doherty.
it. Now, I should say that Shannon Doherty, this is my generation. She's a Gen X, was a Gen Xer. We're talking about people that are, you know, I'm just saying, people that are now in our 50s and late 40s, 50s, 60s, 62. Also, think about this. A lot's changed since then, right? Well, let's watch a little bit of this. It's kind of fun. John was going to say just a little bit, kind of a...
This show has just exploded. Why?
I think it's because it's the first show that really portrays teenagers as having intelligence and really deals with controversial issues, and it appeals to a huge group of, you know, all ages. I mean, anybody can watch the show.
Yeah, and how are you dealing with the success of it all? You've been on covers of magazines?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, earlier today I just got done doing a photo shoot with actually I think it's a photographer that you worked with, Charles Bush.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he's a great photographer, so I got done. You know, it's pretty hectic, and there's a lot of backlashes to it in the sense of that you start picking up magazines and reading really bad articles about yourself and tabloids saying that, you know, you don't get along with the people that you work with and that you throw temper tantrums and you're this and you're that.
Okay, not to get into the weeds on 90210 fandom, but there was the I Hate Brenda newsletter, and so this is the period of time in which everybody was unfortunately dumping on her character and, you know, creating these fake controversies where you praise and extol one star and you put them against a star that's the villain. And I guess Jenny Garth was okay, but she wasn't. And again, for the purpose of this episode, that is of zero interest to me, although it might be somewhat of interest how she handles it and talks about it. I'm interested in the guest host thing that's going on
and
here.
that's
Like
kind of the drawback of it all, because
yeah.
you know that that's not you, and it's like Jason and I supposedly don't get along, and we're actually the closest people on the show. I mean, we love each other to death, and that's kind of hard to deal with. But the rest of it, I love. You know, I love it when people come over to me and they ask me for my autograph and they like the show, and I mean, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, Jason and Luke have both been here, and they seem to have a debate going as to who started the sideburn thing.
Well,
Do you know?
I can clear that one up,
Oh,
and
okay.
I want to clear that one up. I have to tell you, Jason had sideburns first. And he's
Okay,
got
it's
the best
important. In case you were wondering.
Okay? Don't you think? Come on.
You know, you work with these guys, and women probably are very jealous of you because you work with these guys. Tell us about them. Any bad habits that we should know about?
Oh, no, not Jason or Luke. No bad habits whatsoever. You know, they'd kill me if I said anything about them. They're,
Okay, I'll tell you what.
they're
Tell
actually
the
great
ladies.
guys.
Okay, tell ladies in America like some secret 411 that they might want
Well,
to
you
know
guys
about.
have to know that Jason is one of the sexiest men ever, right?
Okay.
I mean, you guys know that, don't you?
This is the very...
I think so.
This is the more banal part, but again, the fact that they're talking about people having sideburns and what kids are doing, and he's asking about who's the sexiest, this very, I'd say water cooler, just stuff that was important in 1990, 91. The kind of material we're dealing with now in these episodes is just that kind of material. It's like definitional. That's what you're going to talk about. You're not going to talk about something, you know, obscure or rarefied. This is pop culture. This is popular culture. She's a big star, you know, and he's Arsenio Hall. But I mean, I submit that he is brilliant at connecting with this particular guest. And, you know, I've want, you know, and also knowing if he's going to bring up something that's a little spicy or maybe hot button, he knows how to do it. So, you know, these are these cute guys. All the girls of America love these two guys. do they have a flaw, which is very, by the book kind of procedure in his style. I also like very much the way Arsenio Hall is physicality. The shoulder pads, the clothes of that era, the 90s. Looking at different eras. So, what should I do now? Should I go to Dick Cavett? I don't know. I just don't know.
Dick?
So, there are different kinds of talk shows. One of those shows is Dick Cavett Show. This is a notorious show. Notorious, infamous, famous show. When John Cassavetes, Peter Falk, Ben Gazzara had just made the movie Husbands, 1970, 71. And basically come on the set of the Dick Cavett Show and kind of demolish it. And it's a great episode. Dick Cavett wasn't crazy about it, but I'm just going to play a little bit of it.
Cavett Show 191, BTR
'cause I don't
91870, air 92170, take 2.
Let's see here.
The Dick Cavett Show, with special guests, John Cassavetes, Peter Falk, Ben Gazzara, and Bob Rosengarten and the orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, Dick Cavett.
I'm going to cut past this, go past some of this stuff and see.
So half preempted by football, and we...
I'm not going to...
No, they are.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, here we go. It's a little bit like...
Falk's having a little trouble getting seated there.
Did you call us animals?
He's an animal.
Now, please,
How do you answer that? Go ahead.
I meant that merely in the most flattering sense.
Did I say hello to my mother? Because that was the first thing I... Mom, I want to tell you hello.
It's like the old days of boxing.
And to Sonny and the construction crew at Universal, I say hello.
Hi, Sonny.
We don't know anyone else.
Is the bar open backstage?
It's Saturday night, so I thought I would play.
Film. It's finished now, is it? You've done it all, and it's over? Is it? Would you like to nominate one who speaks? What is this? Are you guys going to sit out here and clam up on my first 45-minute show? I think we know the answer to that. Well, who says that men's underwear is supposed to be white? Well, here's an opinion from... Are you guys going to...
Match?
I got
Now, wait. Now, you guys aren't going to put me on, are you?
What do you want to match?
What happened?
I just started to lead into a Jockey Short commercial.
The film is finished.
The film is finished.
Coward! Coward! We weren't going to talk to you for 45 minutes. He broke it.
Don't start now.
In other words,
That's not cowardice, that's sensitivity.
you mean, in other words, two of you thought it would be funny to come out here and not talk to me.
That's right.
Ask him why he wore those clothes.
No, Dick, we didn't think it would be fun. We thought you would be fun.
I hope they show your movie on TV and interrupt it with deodorant commercials.
You see what I mean? You see what I mean?
What is that?
Now, do you want more encouragement?
No, wait.
Because it's 3 to 1.
Wait.
Is it because it's 3 to 1?
I'm aligning myself with the money.
Please do.
All right.
Again, Ben?
Yes.
So it goes on like this, and it's a... it's in different parts. There's a moment in their antics. I mean, it gets wilder and wilder as it goes on, but there's a moment when Peter Falk goes into a monologue. And of course, Peter Falk is doing Columbo right now at this time, hit TV show. And he goes into a monologue, like an essay about the difference between sentimentality and emotion in art. I wish I could find where it is. I don't know if it's part 1 and goes, and everybody's like, what is he? It's kind of amazing, actually. Of course, they include the original ads. The, what did we got? Don't want to get these ads, these kind of things. I don't know. You get the picture. I'm going to turn the TV off. Enough television. And turn it off. What does all this have to do with? What does all this have to do with aesthetics or art? You know? Wonder about that. I'm thinking out loud about it, so. Well, you know, I've been talking about the notion of a human being making something. Like, you can make a piece of music, or you can make something. And what you make is, if you do make something, what you make is a little bit of removed from direct reality. That's the representational aspect of it. So, you know, you're seeing talk shows, nighttime talk shows, and there's a guest and a host, but they're not, you know, they're not in real life. In other words, they're not visiting each other in their living room or going out. They're performing for a public, and it's stage, and there's makeup, and there's lights, and there's sets. And I want to go back to Susan Sontag, of all people, somebody who did not like any of this stuff, most likely. Although she did like John Cassavetes' films. Okay, I want to make clear, Susan Sontag would not have thought much of Dick Cavett, I'm sure, but she thought very highly of those 3 actors in that film. But all that aside, Susan Sontag is writing about Proust in her essay in Fine Art, you know, and Stendhal, The Red and the Black, and Jane Austen novels, and the films of Robert-Bresson, she mentions, and Ozu. What, if anything, does that have to do with Beverly Hills 90210 and Arsenio Hall? Well, maybe. Let's go back to the text that we inaugurated our series all about aesthetics. Maybe. Let's see. Got my glasses. Got here. Number 9 in Against Interpretation, she says, transparency is the highest, most liberating value in art and in criticism today. Transparency means experiencing the luminousness of the thing in itself, of things being what they are. This is the greatness of, for example, the films of Bresson and Ozu and Renoir's The Rules of the Game. Once upon a time, say for Dante, of the Inferno, right, Dante, it must have been a revolutionary and creative move to design works of art so that they might be experienced on several levels. And that gets into Northrop Frye and the allegorical and these different sort of English, all these old literary criticism things. I don't want to get into that now, but what she's talking about. She says, once upon a time that would have been great. She says, now it is not. It reinforces the principle of redundancy that is the principal affliction of modern life. So she's saying modern life has this affliction. In 1966, she's writing, in 65. And the affliction, you know, for her, you know, she's saying all these levels and all this analysis and all this symbolism can be an affliction. What about the thing itself? And so everything I played today, these little clips of these most I don't know, most common talk shows from the 90s, the 70s and the 90s, are things themselves. And if we look at them, which we did today, we at least have to take into account somewhat what's in front of us. So how Arsenio Hall talks to Shannon Doherty. The mad craziness, the Jerry Lewis influence on Cassavetes and Peter Falk and Dick Cavett, Farrah Fawcett, on and on. These are things in the world that present themselves to us. And so a great deal of their meaning, their effect is precisely their immediate, sensuous communication with us in the audience. That's, I dare say, that's 75% of it. I'm not saying that's all of it, but I'm saying it's a great deal. So to put it more bluntly, when you eat food, it's the taste of the food. When you hear music, it's what the music sounds like. And when you stand in front of a painting, it's how you feel. If indeed feeling itself is what's called for, because it isn't always what's called for actually, in front of a painting. And that's something that we can, experience as human beings. And that's also something we could communicate and say, well, I felt this or I experienced this. And that's very important. And what I'm saying is I don't want us to lose sight of that. And so in that sense, everything we're talking about on our podcast really falls under that. We're going to have some kind of an experience. And that experience is, going to make us feel and think things. And I really do think that's kind of what Susan Sontag is getting at in her essay, It Gets Interpretation, is that one time interpretation was a radical act. And now in the 60s, we feel that the thing itself is what's important. So maybe Johnny Carson's sort of corny nervousness in front of this, to him, beautiful woman, and the awkwardness of that, and maybe his white jacket he's wearing, and her red dress, or maybe that stage, and the corniness of it, and the fact that it's on network television, the fact that it's interrupted by these advertisements for deodorant and white jockey shorts, maybe all of that in the end was the point of television in those years. It was a sort of it was all part of the mix and all went into making what the experience was all about. And so I'm suggesting that it's no different, it's no different for anything else. So this is going to be my last, for some time, my last discussion of television, network television. We will have other subjects, of course, and all about aesthetics. And I think in the future, our next episode, I don't fully know all that it's going to be, but we're going to go back to some books and back to some, things that take up volume and mass. I do hope you have a good rest of the weekend here at Journey of an Aesthete, and I hope that you, whatever you experience, if you see a movie, if you read a novel, read a book, that you're having an experience. And that counts for everything. So we will return to some more physical media, leave the box behind a little bit, and we will welcome April. So thanks for everybody for coming out, and this has been Journey of an Aesthete, and have a good Sunday if you can.